The work done in Sacramento directly affects our communities and our neighborhoods. From Redwood City to Palo Alto, San Jose to Santa Cruz, all of us should be informed and involved. How can you stay in touch? This is Capital Focus, featuring State Senator Joe Simitian. Capital Focus is dedicated to informing local residents about current events in Sacramento. Here's the host of Capital Focus, Megan Sweezy Fogarty.
Hello and welcome to Capital Focus, a monthly conversation with State Senator Joe Simitian about the issues and legislation affecting our state and our communities. Later in the show, we'll talk about California's renewable energy standards with the Senate Chair of the Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee, Senator Alex Padilla. But first, let's catch up with what's been going on in the Capitol. Big budget month and bill deadline. Start with that.
We had a budget marathon that I think you saw was unlike anything we've experienced in the Capitol, and certainly in my memory and in almost anyone I talk to tells me the same thing. Wasn't pretty, but ultimately we got to the place we needed to be in terms of budget cuts, revenue increases, and some reliance on federal stimulus package money that if it doesn't come will force us to take loans, but my hope and the hope of my colleagues obviously is that we'll see enough stimulus to avoid those loans, which really is not the path we ought to be taking. So as I've said on the show over the years, spend less, collect more, and do it now. I think the part I'm disappointed in is that it took us so long to finally get that balance of reducing our revenues and reducing our expenditures and increasing our revenues, but we finally got there. And
different, we will not have our summer budget standoff.
Well, no, I mean the irony is, no, you're absolutely right that from a technical standpoint, the budget that's due mid-June, June 15th, which we're always still talking about in July and August, much to the frustration of the public, technically that budget's been adopted. We're 4 months early if you're looking for a silver lining, but I think there will be changes. I mean, we're going to have to keep an eye on our revenues to the states, see how the state's doing. If there are fewer dollars rolling into the state treasury than anticipated, that may mean additional rollbacks and cuts. So we're far from over with the budget process, but it should be a little easier for folks in local school districts, for example, to plan ahead now, knowing what's coming for better or for worse. And the one thing we have to remind ourselves of is, if the situation gets even worse still, then there will be, further cuts that are necessary as we approach the coming budget year.
And also, very briefly, some of the budget relies on a May special election.
That's right.
Can you speak to that?
Well, we're going to have half a dozen measures on the May special election ballot, and the budget is largely contingent on the voters weighing in one way or the other on that May 19th special election. Will there be a spending cap / rainy day reserve fund? Are folks comfortable using some of the funds that were previously attributed to other important programs, First Five for young kids, mental health money for getting us through this difficult time? Those are the kinds of questions and the pieces all sort of have to fit together like this in order for it all to work. So it'll be an important time for the public to be sort of fully focused and engaged on the choices they're making at the ballot.
Do you think it's possible for the general public to even understand all of that?
I do.
You wonder?
And I do. And I think, my hope is that there'll be a pretty vigorous debate. People will understand that this is a package, and it's a set of trade-offs that doesn't make anybody particularly happy. There are folks who support the spending cap who don't support the new revenues, but they don't get the spending cap if the new revenues aren't forthcoming. If the new revenues aren't there, then we're not going to be able to move forward with some of the programs that people support. So, as I say, it's a mixed bag, and my frustration is just that it took the state as long as it did to come to the conclusion that we needed to raise our revenues while lowering our expenditures and bringing those two into alignment. That's been sort of the key to all of this from the start. And then it's bill introduction time. We had that deadline at the end of February to introduce bills, so I'm doing a lot of work in the areas environment, education, privacy.
So let's start with environment. What are your bills
Well,
you're most
for three years ago, I said, we have to revisit issues around the delta that we all cherish as an environmental preserve, but also provides water for 2/3 of the state. And I suggested it was time to revisit a debate we'd had about 25 years ago in terms of a conveyance to move water around that delta. Controversial issue. 3 years later, the science, I think, has caught up with the position I articulated then, and I'm hopeful that this year or certainly this session, we'll actually be able to make some progress about both preserving that as an environmental resource, the delta itself, but also securing the water supply that's essential to 2/3 of the state. And then in Santa Cruz County, a really, an opportunity to do something that puts a smile on your face. Time to think about how to provide some long-term open space protection in Santa Cruz County, working with local folks from the county there to see if we can't find a way to preserve, open space, water resources, working lands and agriculture, as they're sometimes referred to. I think some kind of an open space district is going to emerge for Santa Cruz County out of the work we do this year.
What's your actual bill do?
Well, the bill actually creates the process and lays out the boundaries of what that would entail, and then hands it ultimately to the voters for their say-so, which is as it should be, I think. But we've got to provide the framework and the authority for that in state law, and then it'll be up to the voters in Santa Cruz County to say thumbs up or thumbs down. And if we do our work right, it should be a thumbs up.
Great. How about education?
Still working on the data issues. I think,
and this is where you track.
Well, we don't, it really comes into sharp relief. No money to do new things this year or next. If anything, folks are trying to hang on desperately to programs. But, I've always said, if we're never going to have as much money as we want for education, then we need to spend the money we have as wisely and effectively as we possibly can. But without some kind of a data system that tells us, does this program work? Does that program work? Does staff development really produce better results in the classroom once we've trained those teachers? Class size reduction, usually popular with everyone I talk to, but we can't really tell for sure if it's having an impact in the classroom. In order to do that, we really need to begin to pull together the data on a statewide basis so we can ask ourselves, okay, when those teachers were trained, did it make a difference? When those class sizes were smaller, did it make a difference? I have become the data guy. It is not the most exciting. I put whole rooms of people to sleep talking about this, but it really matters in terms of what kind of experience your kid has in the classroom. Privacy issues, I'm still working a lot on online privacy issues. The law that I co-authored 6-7 years ago now with then Senator Steve Peace has become a model for the rest of the country, but it's time to revisit the way we make sure that if your data is lost from somebody's system, you get noticed, you can protect yourself. What else can we do to make that protection a little bit more vigorous? So it's what I love about the work, big mix.
Great package. All right, well, we have to go to break so we can get Senator Padilla on.
We want to do that.
Okay, up next on Capitol Focus, California's energy policies. Stay with us.
Hit it.
Support the Red Cross and change a life, starting with your own.
The dream of education beyond high school, the cost can put it out of reach. There is help. We are Federal Student Aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. Each year we award $80 billion to all eligible students and families. Learn more at federalstudentaid.ed.gov. Don't get left behind. The most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here. Go further.
As a parent, sometimes it's hard to believe your kids listen to a word you say. So when it comes to drugs and alcohol, it can be tempting to say nothing at all. But you actually have tremendous influence. So it's a simple choice. In this hand, how to make your kids more likely to get involved with drugs. In this one, how you can help them stay away from drugs.
Welcome back. I'm Megan Sweezy-Fogarty, along with State Senator Joe Simitian. We're joined today by State Senator Alex Padilla, Chair of the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's always great to have someone from Los Angeles and hear the north-south things going on. But I want to start with, reading over your bio, you have had an incredible public service trajectory already as a fairly young person, and lots of firsts. I just wanted to start with what makes you tick in public service? Why are you doing what you do?
Well, I love my job, first of all. I mean, I think bottom line is I get to help people, and I know Joe and I have had many conversations about this job that we carry that requires a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of commitment, and it's got to be worth something at the end of the day. But we get to help our constituents from little everyday problems to big global issues and everything in between. It's certainly not what I dreamt of doing when I was growing up. I grew up in the Los Angeles area, a product of public schools in Los Angeles, and son of an immigrant parent, so it was a very modest home where education was absolutely enforced each and every day. And I grew up sort of enjoying math and science, and so I thought my career path was going to be engineering. Went off to MIT, got a mechanical engineering degree.
Yeah, how many engineers are there in the legislature? I was curious about that.
Precious few.
We can take that up at the break.
And sort of saw that as my career path until I actually started working as an engineer, and way too much time in the lab, way too much time behind a computer by myself, at least for my personality. And I started thinking, well, what else out there is there for me to pursue as a career path? And it was during those moments when I actually reflected on something my mother insisted on when I was a kid growing up, and that was community service, volunteerism. Whether it was painting over graffiti in the neighborhood, or cleanup days at the park or in church or something or another, developing that warm feeling you get when you do something to make the world a better place. And I just feel fortunate that I found a career that gives me that warm and fuzzy feeling on the inside and allows me to pay my bills and, more importantly, try to have an impact.
Yeah. Megan, you have a background with service learning, of course, but I think it's the same impulse that a lot of people have who just channel it into a different kind of public service. And we talked once on a previous show about the fact that when I was working my way through law school, I was a group home counselor for delinquent boys. And I'm better at this job than I was at that one. I guess I'll just let it go at that. But different people serve in different ways, and elected office is only one of the ways to serve, and it's certainly not for everybody. But I think those of us who end up here, the best of us are people like Alex and others who came because they had the same public service calling that took someone into teaching or working with troubled kids or doing work in the environmental arena. It's the same impulse. It just gets channeled in a very different way.
That's absolutely true. Before we started rolling the tape, you were talking about the Coro Fellows Program, which specifically the main reason I applied for that fellowship program was it provides exposure to various sectors. There's public sector assignments, there's a private sector assignment, a media organization, nonprofits, et cetera, and I was hoping to find my calling. Having gone through a year of that program, I came out more confused than I went going in because I loved them all. Yeah. And I think one of the points of that program is service is universal, and regardless of what your title is or where you're working from, it's all about the vision, it's all about the goal. And just specific contacts and opportunities moved me in the direction of electoral politics in elected office.
Alex, we've talked a little bit about the fact one of the things you discover when you're new to the legislature, and Alex came straight to the state senate without prior service in the assembly, is how different other parts of the state are. While we have a lot in common, a lot of different issues. Alex comes from an urban setting in Los Angeles, obviously. My district's predominantly suburban. We have colleagues who come from, very wide open space type places that are highly rural. I'm just curious what your take has been in terms of a whole different set of perspectives that come from people from other parts of the state that are very much unlike the place you came from.
Well, I learned enough from not just the Coro Fellows program, but having grown up in Los Angeles, but having gone back east to school and really having met people from all over the country. I learned enough prior to my election to the Senate to know that I'll be serving with 39 others, and we all have very different perspectives. I mean, in each and every one of our own districts, there's a number of perspectives. So somehow it all has to work together. And there's a delicate balance between advocating fiercely for our districts, which I do, which Joe does, and every one of us does, but balancing that with the interest of the state as a whole. So when it comes to issues like water, like energy policy, like transportation funding, like anything else, we know there's a greater balance to be played. At least I came in with that mentality, and it's been helpful in actually getting things done for my own district.
And certainly both of you have the opportunity to work on some of the compelling issues that are facing our state. Not to mention the budget crisis that brings all of us
No
together.
shortage of challenges right now. That's right.
But let's talk about one of those. Let's talk about what's going on with energy policy.
Yeah.
Certainly one of the pieces of legislation that's going to come before your committee is SB 14.
Do
you want to talk about what it is?
No, I mean Alex is a joint author
Okay.
on this is the renewable energy bill, and we've joked it's you sometimes feel like the world's finally caught up with you. Alex, with his background, is a perfect fit for chairing the energy committee. It's a place where there is a lot going on right now, as you can imagine. And we've been talking about these issues, some of us, for a long time, and all of a sudden it's just great to see that folks have figured out that there is more than just an environmental aspect to renewable energy, that it's about cleaner air, climate change, protecting ourselves from the kind of market manipulation that we saw back in the earlier part of this decade. It's a foreign policy issue in terms of energy security. So, apart from the environmental benefits, there's just a host of other, and it's an economic development issue. Alex and I talk a lot about what are we going to do to create jobs in California, and particularly in the clean, green economy that we're hoping to grow in Silicon Valley. I mean, if we don't get out in front on these issues, then those are jobs that are going to go to some other place. And for us, the sort of touchstone, and this is what the bill's all about, is 33% of our state's energy ought to come from renewables by 2020. If we're clear about that target and that date, and we're serious about getting